All right. So it has been at least a couple months, maybe even 3 months, since we last released an episode, whether it be a planned numbered episode or an unnumbered episode for the Anatomy Crosscast. Ladies and gentlemen, and everything possibly over or in between, from the algorithm, from the demographic that is contained within my main channel, Sean Cross, welcome back to the show. Early on, I think it's most important to note that the mic quality is going to be a little bit different because over time, despite me having a Shure SM7B, well, there have always been complications that come with using the Shure SM7B, specifically with the podcast. You give it maybe about an hour and, well, the mic audio cuts out. And in some sessions previously, earlier this year, maybe the second quarter really of 2024, there were many instances to where there were at least like 10-minute segments that I would have to cut out. And once the featured guest band or artists finally realized what was going on, or Finn mentioned it, that's when I adjusted everything in real time. Well, I don't really want to deal with those type of complications anymore. So that's one thing that we're hoping to improve, even if the mic quality from the camera, the webcam, my Logitech Brio that I've been using since at least later 2021, well, I can only hope that it improves some aspects of the show. But after so long, people, our first session back of two today on the 21st of July, the weekend after some very, very, very serious and very scary stuff happened here in the United States in the political atmosphere, without making the podcast about politics. Well, a lot of people have had time to breathe. They've had time to look back on that, and people have made their observations and their theories since then. But history, nonetheless, American history. Now we once again dive over to a country that I'm proud to say we've interviewed artists from at least 7 times now. Artists including Malice, recently reincarnated from monasteries. We've hosted Draconian Rain. We've hosted To Obey a Tyrant. And, well, there are plenty of others that I'm just not immediately conjuring into the forefront of my mind. But today, as I continue accumulating an appreciation for bands such as, and not limited to, Osaya, Ingested, those we've hosted already mentioned, and plenty more over in the UK scene. Well, now we provide appreciation, we provide spotlight to a brutal death metal band called Pathogenic Virulence. What I can say too is that through Instagram, whether it be an AI-based algorithm or not, maybe it was actually recommendations by some moderators behind the scenes. Who knows? It's most likely A, but that's okay, because AI is integrated in every aspect of our life now. And it's kind of crazy to think about, but it's what it is. Instagram recommended me Pathogenic Virulence just through one of their advertisements, right? I listened to one of their songs, and just like most of the recent inquiries, I immediately said, hey, I like you guys' sound. It's ambient, but not too ambient. It's relentless. It's ruthless. It's groovy. It's brutal death metal. Do you guys want to come onto the show? And I do believe, if you guys can confirm or deny this for me, just to, keep me accountable for myself. One inquiry, one question led to an answer. And I think over the course of the last 3 months, maybe even 2, that is how we got to where we are today. Can you guys confirm that? Is it like months in the works now that we've been talking about this, or?
It's a few months. Yeah,
a few months.
The video in June.
There we go. Exactly. So it's been quite a bit of time since I first initially reached out to this band, and now on July 21st, one podcast of 2, in which this afternoon, 4 p.m., I will actually be jumping over to Australia to talk with the first ever band we hosted on the show, To the Grave, but more of the members and, well, members who are still on the lineup, as opposed to that debut podcast episode that only lasted 43 minutes. because there was no script back then, there was no structure. Well, we will be having To the Grave return. We will be listening to their tail end of August Unique Leader Records' third full-length album, Everyone's a Murderer, which I think is a pretty self-explanatory album title, just regarding how, well, there aren't that many people in the world that have decided to go vegan compared to those who have. Like, those who have is a small percentage. So therefore, in that aspect, with the animal abuse that does occur in the agricultural market, in the farming market, the cattle market, well, in that instance, in that context, yeah, almost everyone's a murderer, unfortunately. And it really isn't of anybody's own volition, but modernized capitalist grocery market systems, right? The grocery markets that we know of today on a worldwide scale, they enable this kind of behavior. They enable these kind of industries. So it's of nobody's own volition, but, you know, they represent, I think, a really good message. And I cannot wait to also participate in that conversation this afternoon. Have Dane come on, represent his tattoo work, represent this album, represent everything that To the Grave is about, you know, like we just mentioned, and then hopefully gather that all into at least 4 hours. We'll see what happens. So full circle back to the present, right? Because we got to be in the now. We can't be thinking about the future all the time because we have no control over the future. Until we get that session started this afternoon, well, we're going to the UK. So at the very least, we're not staying here in the United States. We love all our US local homies who have been with us since the beginning, but it's time to dot across the pond once more. So tonight, again, we are hosting 2 members of Pathogenic Virulence. And of course, I will have them introduce themselves in a second. But I am greatly looking forward to the session, as we will also, as per Brandon O'Neill from Vile Revelation, Abadonia, and Oogasm, we will be continuing the tradition of doing an album listening session for their new album out July 31st through Brutal Mind Indonesia, called Scorched. Album cover looks sick, and that's also why we have a more blue theme. That's why I'm wearing this awesome one-piece 2 like short and vacation shirt outfit. It also just feels really nice in this Arizona heat, where on average right now the temperatures are like 108, 113 in the middle of the day, and it maybe slowly crawls back down to 90 at midnight. We're dying out here, but trying to make the best of it, right? Trying to embrace what is left of the summer season, as Arizona also has monsoon season coming in. We have these major storms. We have dust storms coming through, and then not exactly paparazzi lightning storms like you would see over in the East or Midwest, but pretty powerful storms that ambush most Arizonans, or zoners, as I call them, without pity, without mercy. But, gentlemen, for me, it's morning time, so I got my coffee. But like you guys said, you guys got your beers nice and cold. How are you both doing tonight?
Well, first I'm gonna open my beer.
Same here, man.
And also, something really cool, and it doesn't happen that often, is this is actually going to be the first interview, the first podcast representing Pathogenic Virulence with at least 2 of the members from the lineup. So I'm also really grateful for that opportunity, being the first to kind of tell your stories as musicians, because, well, that's usually the niche of this show, is to tell the stories of musicians, to tell the stories of artists on an international scale. But seldom do we have the opportunity to be first in line. So I do appreciate you guys keeping me in mind. Maybe not intentionally, you know, like we're going to be on this show first, but you know, that's what ended up happening anyways. So if I could, I would like to have you introduce yourselves via name and position in the band. And we will go ahead and move on from that point by starting with listening to Scourged.
So first of all, cheers for having us on the show. We really appreciate it, man. Yeah, this is our very first podcast. We've never done a podcast before. So yeah, cheers to you and to everyone watching. Like I said, we're Virulence from the UK. My name is Radu. I do vocals and guitars.
Main songwriting, to be honest. I'm Alin. I do bass, and that's about it.
Okay, cool.
Cool. Yeah.
Sweet. And thank you, gentlemen, for introducing yourself. I do believe I missed your name. You said Vadu?
Radu. Radu, yeah.
Okay, Radu.
It's
Okay, as in
R-A-D-U.
like R-I-D-U?
Like
Okay, so Radu.
Rad, and then a U at the end.
Okay, Radu. Radu or Radu?
Radu, yeah.
Like Radu, okay. Just wanted to make sure I got that pinned down early on. That way there isn't any awkward moments where I'm like, what's your name again? After asking the longest question in existence, right? So we got Radu, we got Alin. Thank you, gentlemen, for introducing yourself. Welcome to the show once again. I hope to provide a more intimate experience as far as any questionnaire. Did you gentlemen receive the questionnaire that I meant to send over? Like, do you have that? Did you have time to? Okay, cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
The last thing I need is for you guys to be ambushed by that wider questionnaire. So I'm glad you guys had the opportunity then to go ahead and look through those questions, think of those answers, and provide, well, a great amount of information about yourselves, about the relevant elements of the band, after we listen to the album. I'm very excited for this, gentlemen. We will go ahead and immediately go over to sharing screen for this album and just listening to it. And thank goodness it's all the tracks are numbered because I would be having some difficulties if they weren't, if I'm being completely honest. So now I attempt, with whatever energy I have left for the session, as you know, the commentary thus far has been pretty demanding, right? Now we dig into the actual questions. We learn the story of our musicians here in session, that being Radu and Alin from Pathogenic Virulence. Radu being the guitarist, vocalist, lyricist, according to Alin, the main songwriter, Alin being the bassist, which the way that he does bass is pretty fucking important. So,
Thank you. Thanks, man.
yeah, you're welcome. So we have our questionnaire, and we send this questionnaire as of really this year and later last year to every single band. That way, depending on how long it takes us to actually get into the Google meeting and do the podcast session in the first place, well, our featured musicians, our featured artists, bands have the time to think of the answers to these questions to themselves. And that way, maybe, other than any additional commentary that I could possibly ambush them with regarding, you know, just kind of what tangents off of the questions themselves, but not by too much, we can kind of get through all these different questions in an efficient amount of time. And after all, the Anatomy Crosscast, especially when it's just manned by me, well, it's really meant to cater towards all of our metal and counterculture enthusiasts who might also happen to be going on road trips. Maybe they're looking for new bands, but they don't just want to listen to the music. So instead, they come here. They're recommended by any of our now 44 monthly followers over on Spotify, which thank you all. And in fact, I think one thing I want to do before we get started is kind of look at the statistics that we got going on over on the Anatomy Crosscast, and I'll go ahead and stop presenting as well. That way we can kind of get the album out of the way, even though it's a great album. So, you know, nothing against the album. If we go over to Spotify for podcasters, and if I reload the page, because it's been a little bit since I've been on this public domain page and I'm having issues with the app, whatever. If we go to the home page and look at the audience, look at the monthly listeners, the overview, currently we are at 41 monthly Spotify followers. We have so far had 1,145 plays, which is on average 5 plays per episode, which is awesome. It's really, really cool after all these years and quite literally, it's been years since we started this show and gotten Spotify for podcasters set up, which was formerly Anchor. It's just really cool to even see that we have 5 plays per episode amongst the 80 or 81 that we now have. Our audience size in the last 7 days has been 7, but honestly, it's better than nothing. And our current Spotify impressions, which means you just happen to see this in your recommended algorithms on Spotify, we currently have in the last month 2,398 Spotify impressions. So at the very least, even if we don't have 2,398 monthly listeners, at least that many people in the last month have been recommended our show. And I thank Spotify for that, even though, unfortunately, and this is just out of absolute transparency, they're lacking in other places. But it is the kind of conquering, modernized platform for access to music in your car without having to pay so many different premium monthly subscriptions. Somewhere you can see video versions of podcasts now, which is nice. You get my point. But as far as specific countries, currently, mass majority of you are from here in the United States. We have a 78% majority. Second place actually would be New Zealand. We have 7% of our overall audience based in New Zealand. Third place would be Australia with 2%. And fourth place would be Germany with 2%. It seems that we only have really 1% from the UK. So hopefully this podcast session will kind of raise the bar of that a little bit. Like over time, I think my overall goal will be to see how the different countries like kind of compete and bounce around, because, well, when we are the international counterculture music history podcast that we are, my intention is to reach as many of you as possible. So that's why we interview bands from as many countries as possible, just to kind of like reach out and say, hey, we've been doing this for a long time. Please share this with all of your buddies in the local Indonesian scene. That way, the good old Carta Club, as I'm calling it, until further notice, because most of the cities over in Indonesia, for example, their suffix would be Carta. I can only imagine that's like city or town, but I don't know. So disclaimer. The intention over time is world domination without being a dictator or a tyrant. So, as far as any comments, because we do seem to have some new ones, which is really cool, as soon as it loads, of course. Let's see. On episode 59, featuring Donovan Parchment, Alex Norse, and Brekovac from I Satan, which we uploaded last year, the question went as follows. Who would like for us to host Disembodied Tyrant and Synestia for their split EP in one session, which is something that we wanted to do, but the EP, The Poetic Ada, has been out for some time now, and we just never really got a response from those bands. 18 days ago, Ellie replied, yes, that would be dope. So I will do my best as per the publication and the publicity, the spotlight that we're providing to this comment in real time on the show. I will do my best to go ahead and make sure that in the near future, especially if Synestia and Disembodied Tyrant want to collaborate again and continue making EPs, well, we definitely want to get them on the show and have one of our first 2 band in one session podcasts. That'd be groundbreaking. I think it would be. So, Ellie, we will do our best to go ahead and make that happen. Now, a little bit more specifically, without taking much more time, speaking for our UK local podcast sessions. Let's go ahead and check this out, shall we? Without, of course, taking too much time. Malice UK, or Josh Davies from Malice UK, now formerly of Monasteries. We currently have 10 streams, 10 listens to that episode. Let's go ahead and see, people, if we can get that episode to 20. Let's go ahead and compete. Let's go ahead and kind of shake up the algorithm a little bit here, and let's see if we can raise the stream count for that episode. I think that would be an awesome thing to accomplish. Other than Malice UK, really, Draconian Rain, that was episode 55. That was published September 1st of last year. We only have 9 streams on there. So if we could do that with that episode as well, that way we can shake up the algorithm. Let's go ahead and get that episode to 15 streams, right? Let's make it happen, people. I know you can do it out there. And because I think the last session that we did with To Obey a Tyrant was such a long time ago, we're not even going to scroll back and attempt to persuade. But of course, depending on how many streams there are in that, let's just continue listening to those UK local artists as we celebrate getting another one on the show. But now I go ahead and turn into Metal David Attenborough as it gets later and later over in the UK for Radu and Alin. So part 1, really we introduced these gentlemen, we introduced them by name and their position in the band. So whoever wants to go first, let's go ahead and take 10 to 20 minutes to provide the audience and listeners a roadmap from start to finish, ending with said person joining or founding Pathogenic Virulence. Take it away, gentlemen. Go ahead and go as far back as possible, and let's learn about, maybe even babyface Radu before he came to the UK and spent the last 9 years here so far. Like, when did you first get your when did you first get into music? That's probably a good start.
Oh wow, I think that would be probably when I was 10, 11, I think. I mean, I grew up in a household that my parents, I mean, half of my parents anyway, my parents are divorced, so half of my parents were, as in my dad, he was listening to a lot of Deep Purple and Pink Floyd and, stuff like that. And I was always intrigued by, the guitar, but also the drums. And I would say, like, into metal, my first sort of contact into, let's say, extreme metal. I don't want to go that much into, Iron Maiden, Metallica, that sort of stuff. That was very early on, jumping from Deep Purple, Pink Floyd, and then jumping to Iron Maiden. And then when I discovered Pantera, I was just blown away. But like into the extreme metal, death metal, I would say Cannibal Corpse in 2000 with their record Live Cannibalism. It was a tape that my brother brought home from high school from a friend of his, and it was like, yeah, check this out, because we were watching TV, MTV, and there was this a lot of a big compilation of music. You had Crematory, you have Blind Guardian, you had stuff like Immortal, but at the same time you had Devoured by Vermin by Cannibal Corpse. So it was like, yeah, fuck yeah. So yeah, when my brother brought that tape home, I was like, oh shit, that's wow, that's something that okay, I can relate to. Yeah, and then jumping forward the next 3 to 4 years, I was more passionate about guitar. Well, I actually I wanted to become a drummer at one point. Before I actually grabbed the guitar, I always used to make drums out of my pillows and had and stuff like that, and make a bag of coins to simulate the hi-hat and the cymbals.
Yeah, oh my god, see, that's why we asked these questions, man. That's why we asked these questions. You might have been a drummer, but then something happened. Something switched in your brain and you said, nah, I don't think I want to be a drummer. The kit's too expensive, or whatever the fuck the reason was. Like, this is the stuff we want to know about, and this is the stuff your fans want to know about. Continue, please.
Well, it was actually a funny story why I never become like an official drummer. I know I can drum, and I'm not a drummer per se, like in any band at the moment. I was at one point, but the reason why I stopped drumming, it was we were renting this this place in our hometown, and obviously I didn't have my own drums, and I had this guitar player. He was like, let's go and do some jams, and I was like, okay, what song should I learn? And he was like, yeah, by Hypocrisy, Abducted, Rosal 47. I was like, okay, yeah, that's fine, I can do that, no problem. Just like, okay, so that was pretty easy, But at one point, the guy came in who owned the drums, and I was like, what are you doing? Well, I'm drumming. Well, he said, yeah, that's fine. Finish the song, finish your session, but then afterwards, I want to have a chat with you. I was like, okay, that's fine. So we finished the song, and then we stepped outside, and the guy was like, well, you know, kid, those are my drums. I was like, oh, okay, I didn't know, because it was like the property itself, it was more like what do you call that, like a circle of talents, like a building made for, you know, people that wanted to go and learn stuff. So, you know, you had sports stuff, you have karting, you had, you know, music and so on. So I thought it was just like, okay, you had the drums there, might as well drum, why not? But no, apparently not. That was just someone's private, you know, equipment. So the guy was like, yeah, never touch my drums again. So, and I didn't. And since I think, so that was in 2002, 2003, I think. So until 2007, I don't think I touched the drum kit ever again.
Oh my God. That's so sad, but like
That's
thinking back on it, it's funny as hell. Because you're like, oh, dude, I just saw like a ray of hope shine down on the set. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to try. And then you came in here. You came in like the fucking devil, dude. And you're like, hey, get my set. Get off my set, kid. And then you're like, fine, cool. Guess I'll die then. Guess I won't ever try again. Like, that shit sucks. But it's just funny to look back on because obviously you've accomplished what you have with Pathogenic Virulence so far. So by all means, you had that brief tangent where you were trying out for drums. You were probably having a lot of fun, and then, you know, whatever this teacher, whatever this person who happened to own the city's like, fuck off, kids. So you're like, okay, cool, bye. So let's continue from that point. Like, you were also playing drums in a band. So did you end up having to like part ways with the project after that? Because you're like, yo, I can't even play this public drum set. I can't afford a drum set. What the fuck is affording a drum set? No money, man. Not gonna happen. I give up. Like, was that kind of what happened, or were there other prerequisites? Or were there other variables that played into that story?
No, so basically, after that incident happened, the guy that I was playing in that, well, okay, so it wasn't a band. It was more like this guy that he could play guitar, and me that I would, you know, jam the drums. The guy was like, well, it's okay, no problem. And he ended up being my guitar teacher for about 6 months.
Oh, shit. Okay.
On my dad's guitar in the attic in my hometown, and I just grabbed it. I resurrected it from the dead because it wasn't touched for, I think, 20 years. And I put some new strings. Obviously, it was an acoustic guitar, you know, like a classical guitar, but I put metal strings on it because I wanted it to sound more metal, of course. So I didn't want to, you know, classical guitars, you know, finger style and all of that. I wanted to, you know, strum and, you know, play riffs and so on. So, yeah, basically, the guy that I was jamming in that, you know, band, he ended up teaching me guitar. And, yeah, I loved it more and more. And, yeah, I made it official. I was like, yeah, but I want to get an electric guitar. And I got an electric guitar at one point.
Do you remember what type of guitar you got?
Yes, it was a standard Squire from '96. I think it was the last made in Taiwan edition. After that one from '97, they made them in China.
Oh shit! Okay.
I still have that guitar.
Okay. Yeah.
I sold it back in the day to buy a better guitar, but eventually I managed to recover it, and I still have it.
There you go. That's cool. That's history, man. That's history. That's your story being kind of like concreted and set in stone in physical form, as far as I'm concerned. So that's cool. So, continuing on with the questionnaire, after allowing you those, 10 to 20 minutes to kind of like give us a recap of you becoming a musician, we have question 2. And I think you more or less answered this, which would be, who got you into music? Would you say it was your brother, or would you say it was your music teacher helping you really harness your skill and beginning your roadmap as a guitarist?
Well, into music, I think it was pretty much, the situation that I was being in my family, but my brother, he played a big role in it, 100%. And then obviously the guy that I was jamming with, he he taught me so much. So yeah, he was one of the reasons why I grabbed guitar, because I had someone that believed in me, that, you know, he was like, all right, so I'm gonna show you a few things. If you can do it, then yeah, we can proceed forward. So yeah, he showed me a few riffs here and there, and yeah, in a week I was playing Fear of the Dark from Iron Maiden, you know. And he was like, yeah, okay, we can move forward now. So yeah.
Sweet. So question 3, because I mean we've covered all the main questions in part 2, or no, not part 2, question 2 of part 1. Sorry if that's confusing. There's just a lot of questions, a lot of parts of the questions, yada yada. Question 3 would read, quote, the scene. Okay. So we got question 3, part A, which would be growing up as you got more into metal and rock, or possibly even other genres entirely. Did you have other people in school or in your local community who helped you push forward? Maybe there were bands beforehand, band projects before Pathogenic, Virulence, that allowed you to do the homework of understanding what it was like to be in a band, to be in a band project, to travel, to play music. Were you able to acquire those type of experiences long before Pathogenic, Virulence?
Yeah, that's sort of a multi-question. So
Yes.
yeah, to start from the beginning, yes. So of course we were a group of people, obviously outcasts, right? So like any metalheads in that sort of period, I think even now. But yeah, we were a group of people that we were listening to specific genre. So we were a few that we were listening to black metal and death metal and thrash metal. There was another group that they were listening to, you know, new metal and newish metal, as in that came along a bit later on, and so on. And yes, in terms of scene, I was a bit influenced. I mean, I was hugely influenced by the local scene that we had at a time, and I managed to be part of it. So basically, when I was 15, 16, I was running away from home and to go see these shows in bigger cities, because I was living in a small city. You know, it was like 70,000 people. So I would run away from home into this next bigger city, just 80 kilometers away, to see, you know, extreme metal bands. There were a few, you know, underground festival with Romanian bands, and one of those bands that actually influenced me a lot, and of course after knowing the persons that were in it, they got me even more hooked on the genre and in the scene. That band was Necrovile. You might know the vocalist. He's now the vocalist from Analepsy.
Okay.
He was the guitar player for Pestilence in the couple of
one album and a couple of tours.
No, on Pestilence, no. So just live shows, okay. And Analepsy, the latest album. Yeah. So he got me. They were looking for a second guitar player, and he got me in. Their band, Necrovile. I think it was the only brutal death metal band in Romania at the time. I mean, to be honest, I don't remember being any other brutal death metal. There were death metal bands that were like gore, grindcore, that sort of stuff, but not brutal death metal, not, you know, blast beats 80% of the track and that sort of stuff. So when you know, we met, we've become very, very good friends. We're still very good friends at the moment, and so he showed me how to play fast and all of that, and I was hooked straight away. And I think that was the beginning of my brutal death metal musicianship, or how to call it.
Right. So in that case, that does indeed answer some of the questions in part B of question 3, which would read as, are there any local heroes that are currently climbing the ranks? Analepsy definitely being one of them. I've heard their name thrown around a great many times amongst so many different slam and brutal death metal artists based over in the European regions. It's cool to know that you kind of have that more personal connection with one of the pieces, one of the people involved in that band, if they still are, right?
Yep.
Okay, sick. And let's see. were you in any bands or band projects before Pathogenic Virulence? And what caused the fork in the road that had you depart from those projects? Of course, free of drama, free of any, like, you know, Discord conversations or discourse conversations. What had you depart from those projects, in which those would end up being the precursors, and then you got into Pathogenic Virulence?
So once I got into the scene, I was more involved, and I was, you know, tasting the sweet flavor of metal everywhere. And basically with Necrovile, we were touring a lot. So we were touring a lot of Europe, a lot of countries in Europe. And the more involved I got into the scene, the more I wanted to be part of it. So at one point, I was like in 5 bands at a time. I was playing guitar for Necrovile. I was playing vocals for Klitgore, which is a band with Necrovile members. So it's Alin, which is the vocalist, and Mihaela, which was the bass player at the time in Necrovile. They've made their own band, like a grindcore band called Klitgore. I was the vocalist at one point. Then I was the guitar player for a local hardcore band. I was a bass player for a progressive band, and I was a drummer for a black metal band. So I was like in 5 bands, man. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to be more and more involved in the scene. So I was like, I didn't say no to any projects that appealed to me. You know, if it was something that I was like, yeah, I can learn something from it, and I can have fun with it, then yeah, fuck yeah, I'm gonna go for it. So,
and that's the homework. That really is.
Man. That pretty much. I mean, I've stayed on that path until I came in the UK. In the meantime, so because you asked me if I still was, in sort of some of these bands, and of course I departed from them. I've parted ways with all of them, but there was absolutely no drama. So
yeah,
there was most decisions were taken because of different aspects of life that I
because of the move, of course.
So it wasn't anything, like fuck you guys, I'm just gonna go. No. It was just like more life happening, and obviously more life, less time, and so on. I ended up making my own band at one point, like a thrash death metal band, or death thrash. I was a huge fan of early Sepultura stuff, Schizophrenia, Beneath the Remains. Then Demolition Hammer, Epidemic of Violence, Exorder, Slaughter in the Vatican. That goodness that they were so limited. You can pretty much count the bands on maybe 2 hands. They were like thrash, but brutal thrash. And I made my own band, which I, like we toured a lot. We actually had the international tour with Nile and Vader.
Oh, that's cool.
Around Europe. Yeah. And yeah, that's up until 2015, because in 2015 I moved to the UK. In 2016, we've got together with the drummer Dragos, and we formed Pathogenic Virulence. And then I've met Alin in 2018, I think it was.
Late 2018, I think.
Late 2018, yeah. He got hooked straight away when I told him about the band. I mean, he knew about us. And then, he said yes, and then we've moved forward.
Sweet. Well, that would definitely then speak for like your involvement in the scene and your roadmap as a musician so far. That's definitely more or less what I was trying to pluck from you in the beginning. So now, Alin, you have that formula. We know how to navigate through those questions when it's your turn. But I have I have a couple more questions for you, Radu, and these dig a little bit more for sure. So of course we know you went from Romania to the UK. You even ran away from home, ran away from smaller towns to participate in the scene. And then as you got older, you would be everything you could be to these multiple projects, do the homework, do the projects, get those projects turned in, you name it, you did it. And that's really, really cool. It's really admirable. It's really respectable. So then question 4, quotes, location. And this, I think, would mainly revolve around your time growing up in Romania, right? And how maybe that's affected your creative process with Pathogenic Virulence. Question 4, part A, asks, what is something you can tell us about where you're from geographically speaking that you think was profound as you were growing up, especially in transition from Romania to the UK? Like, what's something really, really profound that you remember about Romania?
Well, that's
It's a loaded question.
yeah, it's a loaded question. Yeah, definitely. So life back in the day was a bit harder than it is right now in terms of anything, you know. So technology changed a lot in the last, 10, 20, 15 years and so on. So it made, things a lot easier for everybody. But, growing up in Romania in a small city was it was pretty tough, you know. I mean, if you come from like a lower sort of income background, and then you're trying to build yourself up, it's pretty hard.
Yes.
And transitioning all of that, so all the experience, all the leveling up like in video games, all the way to coming to UK, where you have a lot more possibilities. There's a lot more chances for anything, professionally speaking, musically speaking, anything. It gives you a lot more, and it makes it a little bit easier. So just to give you an example, so here in the UK, like we have our own practice room, right? We've managed to rent it out, we filled it with equipment and so on. So we're doing our own thing here, that no one bothers us and so on. While back in Romania, when I was in so many bands, you couldn't afford getting your own place and filling it up with gear and so on. So you were basically renting out spaces for 1 hour, 2 hours. You were at the mercy of whatever gear they had. So, for example, you were playing brutal death metal, right? But you didn't have your own equipment, amplifier. So the practice rooms would have like a very, very cheap Marshall, and it wouldn't sound death metal at all. So you would improvise. You would start, you have pedals and so on. It would be a journey, and it was a journey to get here. Well, yeah.
Yes. Cool. Question 4, part B would say, would you say your history in the place you grew up and were born in affected the way that you would write music?
100%. Yes. So anything that I wrote pre-UK was a lot of angry stuff, like based on anger, because of the social situation, political situation of the country that I was in.
Yes.
And I think that was one of the reasons why I had also the Death Thrash band that I had. It was specifically focused on political issues based on the country and world. What was happening in the world at that time, right? And when I was in the UK, I could focus more on the more technical approach of the of the guitar, and then explore this sci-fi side that I have and integrate it inside the music that I'm playing and the way I compose things and what I want. I would pay more attention to stuff that listening to music that would influence me and have more to learn from, then apply it in my own way, because more time, less stress.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would say everything that I've done so far with every single band, yeah, the place that I was, it definitely influenced me 100%.
Hell yeah. Question 4, part C would read, would you say you are connected to this day to where you were born and raised? If not, why?
Connected to the place where I was born.
Yes. So whether, I guess because this question is pretty vague, so that's pretty fair that you don't really know how to answer that. So do you consistently or often look back on your time in Romania in a positive manner, or is it more like I'm really grateful that I was able to get away from the UK? Because you mentioned earlier that whether it be technology, politics, or whatever the case may be, things were just naturally more difficult when you were living in Romania and when you were growing up in Romania. So do you often look back and kind of tether yourself to the original country of your birth, or do you prefer to kind of like look forward and not really think back too much on where you were from?
Oh no, I do. Yes, 100%. I reflect back to every single experience, and I'm grateful for everything that I had in the past. So everything that happened, in terms of events that made me stronger, I always reflect back on it, and I am 100% grateful for everything that I had. It's not something that, so being in the UK right now, it's not something that I look as in an escape from a different sort of environment or politically influenced environment. No, it's just it's a different experience with different people, a different approach. But yeah, I always look back. I'm always grateful for the experience that I had, all the people that I've met, and they've made me into what I am today. And and I miss it sometimes. I still have a lot of friends back home in Romania, and I visit quite often, and
Sweet. And that would conclude question 4. Question 5, are you a gearhead? Current setup?
Oh yeah, I am 100%. I mean, since the beginning, when I was experimenting with pedals and I was trying to get that right tone, based on the influence that I had at the time. So so Pathogenic, Virulence at the moment. So we're embracing digital technology. Both me and Alin, we have campers. We're trying to minimize our gear. So we went from tube amps to camper racks, and now we're at the stage that we're trying to minimize everything into a single pedal board. Again, since the camper player came out, we're both on that pathway to get that tone inside your pocket.
Yeah, fair enough.
But yeah, I would say definitely a gearhead. I mean, I've experimented a lot with many amps, many tones, many approaches. I had a massive pedal board at one point. I was trying to incorporate all sort of things to make my life easier. When I was again doing vocals and guitar, stuff like how control your own pedal board using a single switch. Because I was always in most bands that I was, apart from Necrovile, I was a single guitar player. So basically, I had to think of the the solo part and the rhythm part, and then I had the vocals, and then I always had to switch in between. So what's the best approach? Having an in-ear to hear your vocals properly, and not having that hum coming from the monitors, and then, you have a solo part that you gotta activate a a delay pedal or reverb pedal or whatever. So I was always like experimenting with stuff. What's the best approach? So yeah, I would say I'm a gearhead. Yeah.
Fair enough. Do you have any more toys or tools that you have yet to acquire, or are you pretty satisfied with your current setup?
Well, the current setup that we have at the moment is we've not taken it live yet. So we're still in the transition of sort of experimenting
from a massive rack.
So we used to have a big rack with 2 campers, our own mixer, a channel splitter for the drummer, in-ear monitors, and so on. So we're now going from that to the camper player with myself. I have a Seymour Duncan amplifier, 170 watts amplifier. So that's gonna be the setup actually. But we've not taken it live yet. I think it's gonna be fine. But yeah, I would say so far in the practice room, I'm very satisfied with what I have.
Sweet. Question 6. What lessons have you learned as a person or a musician, and how did those lessons drive you? Or how could they apply to others trying to accomplish what you have so far?
Lessons. Well, I would say, you know, learning from others and applying it to yourself in your own way. That's a very good lesson. Always stick with what you got, and be how can I say it?
Yourself.
Be yourself. Yeah, just be yourself. I mean, the music that I had so many chances in playing a lot of stuff that wasn't me, just because I had the opportunity to play music, but I always stick with the stuff that I like. So I want to play brutal death metal. I'm gonna play brutal death metal. It's not like I'm not gonna be conditioned by anyone or anything. I'm just gonna do my own thing every single time I want it. So yeah, I would say, yeah, yeah. That's pretty much it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Question 7. 5 character slots. Whether new favorite artists, albums, singles, or people that pushed Scourged to its final state. And the reason I mentioned Scourged specifically is in regards to a podcast session by podcast session basis. So in the near future, say you guys want to return, basically at that point we would figure out whether or not you've adjusted any of your favorite all-time albums, or because there's so much music, what are some of your favorite albums, singles, new artists, or people from 2024 or 2023? You may use any of those prompts.
Well, for sure. I mean, influences. There are many influences, but it's not. So we're not taking like a band or a genre per se, and be like, okay, we want to sound like that, or
Right.
no, it was more like a thing of. So we did the first album, Submerged into Non-Existence, and we wanted it to be and to have a more modern sound, which I think we've accomplished with that. So for Scourged, we wanted something to be more natural. If it makes sense, if you're familiar with New Standard Elite label, like all of those bands, all those brutal death metal bands, they're all in that very, very natural element. There's nothing, plasticky about it. There's nothing overproduced. It's just, people playing the way they feel, and it shows in their music. So basically with Scourged, that's something that I wanted to emphasize more compared to the first album. We wanted to have a more natural approach. Like you mentioned, you like the bass. So that was one thing that, you get all these modern productions where you can hear the bass as a bass, but you not necessarily hear it as an instrument. It's so much blended. It's music for massive speakers. It vibrates a lot. Where you have bands like Defeated Sanity, for example, where you can hear every single instrument, and you can appreciate every single instrument, being a fan of it or not. So that's sort of the vibe that we wanted to go with this album. We wanted all the instruments to be separated and have their own feeling and vibe, and we wanted the listener to get that. As in albums, well, I very much enjoyed the last year's Cranium album. It's fucking awesome. I think it's probably the best album since Molested the Decapitated from Defilement.
Okay.
like in terms of old school slam, I very much enjoyed the last Warmed Omegon. It's fucking awesome. Despondency with Matriarchy album, it's fucking sick. I'm looking forward for the new Defeated Sanity album as well. So yeah, there's quite a few releases this year and last year. Yeah, that I enjoy. But yeah, in terms of influence,
Cool.
there's no specific influence. It's more like I wouldn't call it a mix. It's just I don't know, the way I feel when I write stuff. Just that's it. That's me there. So when you hear a track, it's like, yeah, that's what I felt when I wrote it. It wasn't like I was listening to this album or this album or this album or whatever. Because you can hear the influences. I mean, we love bands like Abominable Putridity, then Defeated Sanity, which is completely different. So you have also you have Visceral Disgorge, which is again you have the first compared to the second album, which are completely different. Then you have stuff like Warm, which is more dissonant. So it's like a combination of everything, that we, like and enjoy.
Fair enough. Okay. And to conclude, well, actually, no. Now, basically, we conclude Radu's part of part one, his entry into part one, him telling his story, which, Radu, I really appreciate you participating and answering all these questions. Alin, it's your turn, sir. Let's go ahead and start from question one. And if you want to, being that maybe you understand like how we're trying to run through these questions now, if you want to, I can name them off. I can number them off. Otherwise, you can go ahead and speed through them if you wish. It's completely up. But yeah, let's go ahead and have Alin take the reins for a little bit. Tell your story. Take as much time as you want. And answer as many questions as you can with the document that I sent over.
Cool, no worries. So, yeah, I started, I want to say probably 2004, 2005. That's when I started playing guitar. When it came to listening to music and to actually get into rock and metal, it was one of my neighbors. He was a bass player in I want to say, I think it was just a heavy metal band. He's a massive Manowar fan, very much similar to Manowar's bass player, like in looks as well. So the first time he was the only metalhead in our block of flats, and he was I think just a little bit younger than my mom. I was getting into music and stuff like that, so I just went to him and I was like, "Can I get some music?" Because he always had the coolest covers on like Manowar stuff and Megadeth and Metallica, Iron Maiden. So yeah, he created a couple of compilations for me. We're talking probably 2001, 2002, something like that. And I started basically I think he called them Legends of Rock 1 and 2. And it had Dio, Europe, Maiden, Megadeth, Metallica. It was basically just a mishmash of anything that was like, not glam necessarily, but like just a little bit of glamminess, heavy metal and thrash as well, and Judas Priest as well. So then, the era of digital music kind of came in. We all kind of started getting computers. Also wanted to mention, because I didn't really, I'm also from Romania, which is really funny.
Cool.
To how we met and all of that later on. But basically, just to give you an idea, I was born and raised in Bucharest, which is kind of down south, capital city, whereas Radu is more northwestern.
Transylvania.
Oh shit! Okay.
Yeah. So basically, the very interesting part is when it comes to Romania, music and everything kind of came from the west. So it still came the northern and west, and then it came south. So to an extent, we got shit later, Right. Yeah. But that's when the digital era kind of came in, MP3s and all of that. I started getting access to a lot more music, different genres. Basically, I kind of consumed everything that was thrown my way. We're talking from Typo Negative to Sepultura to Limp Bizkit to Linkin Park to everything. I wasn't necessarily a fan of something specifically. I just wanted more and more and more. And, as I started getting formed as a, teenager and so on, I started getting more into metal, thrash, and death metal. So I think that again goes back to those first few tapes that I got. And then moving from that to start listening to death, Chuck Schuldiner, genius when it came to music, man. And like the first time I listened to Symbolic, it just broke me. So yeah, basically, and in between this period, I got my hands on an acoustic guitar because my neighbor, who was a bass player, he had a bass, and I saw an electric bass for the first time at his place, and I was like, oh my god, what is this electric guitar that you have? And he was like, oh yeah, this is a bass. Played it, and I was kind of hooked. So I got acoustic guitar. Then I went through a phase where I was like, I thought of myself as a guitarist, didn't really pan out. So I went with what I saw at that time as the lazy, and what a lot of people make fun of us bassists for, just being lazy and just moving to 4 strings because 6 strings is too much. And yeah, I started playing bass, and then through a series of just buying different basses and stuff, different basses from friends and stuff, I managed to. I was in an alternative. That was my first band, an alternative, like rock, progressive-y kind of, vibes from like Porcupine Tree and stuff like that. Like grew up and grew out of it to an extent. I moved into a little bit more aggressive stuff and started playing thrash in a band called Cyborg, which was like, it wasn't my project. It was like somebody else's project that I just kind of like got looped in. And man, like that was my introduction to like playing extreme music, basically. We're talking 2007, 2008. And then I think 2009 is when I moved to the UK. So that's when I moved away from the Romanian scene altogether. And found another band where they played, because I moved to Birmingham, which is the home of metal, Black Sabbath, I found a death metal band. We played a few shows where basically we didn't make it past the local scene. We went out and played London and a couple of other like nearby cities, but we never kind of made it big or whatever. Played in that band for about 4 years. We had a couple of opportunities to record. I think we still have drums and guitars recorded for an album that will never really pan out. And bass. We recorded bass, but we never finished bass. My fault. And after that, I moved to London, took a break musically because I just didn't have the bandwidth for what was happening in my career, home life, and everything, and actually do music as well. And in the area that I lived in, I kind of started looking on like on postings to see if I can find some musicians to just jam with, and found some guys that had it was a hardcore metal band. We called ourselves Scum. We released a couple of EPs and some videos. Very interesting stuff musically and rhythmically, and that's basically where I kind of started getting my chops back, as I like with a 1.5 year break on playing guitar in general. Like I was really, really rusty. Played with those guys for a little while, and then joined another band from London called Overthrow. We recorded an album. and I think we released that album probably same year as we released Submerged. Yeah, so at the same time, like I was playing an Overthrow, and that's when Radu dropped me a message just randomly, just like, "Hey, I've got this band. We need a bass player. Do you want to meet up for a chat and see if we click or whatever?" We met up for some beers. Fucking when we clicked, like it was really funny because we're both from Romania. We were both from 2 different cities. We grew up in a similar scene. However, I was more into like the Bucharest South scene, whereas he was more in the northern western side. And yeah, it was really funny because we actually knew a lot of people, but we had never met personally. So yeah. And yeah, that's when I started playing in Pathogenic. Came to a practice. We had a singer back then, and I still remember Benny. He was a character. First practice, I came in. It was a lot of noise, but I managed to find and understand those riffs, and I got hooked basically. Yeah, and after that, like after I joined, it was just we found a certain, let's say, musical kinship, and not just that. We just, we are friends. We don't just come to practice and then never talk again. So yeah, what was next?
Yeah, just to add, when he said that we clicked, we actually got fucking wasted. So we've talked about the band for like 10% of the time, and the rest of 90% we were just like fucking drinking and then, talking tales about stuff that people that we knew in the scene and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, this is the guy. Yeah.
It's good when you can find somebody that you can just talk a lot of nonsense with and actually still make sense and understand each other, So I think that's yeah. So as like from
it's very important
because of sorry.
I just said it's very important.
Yeah. So basically, the scene itself is because I was from Bucharest. It developed differently. However, like I was lucky enough to kind of just probably like Radu, he had a certain type of mentor. I didn't necessarily have a mentor. I just kind of had a lot of friends or made friends that were just more musically better than me. So I just stole a lot of technique. So I just had those opportunities to just be around with people where I stole technique from there. I heard talking about it. I'm like, oh, I can do this, or I can try and do that. And yeah, it wasn't hard, but it wasn't that easy either. It it requires a certain level of dedicated to it. And at that point, I think I was very dedicated to making it as a musician.
Reality is oftentimes confusing. It can be an ambush.
I realized that in order for me to support my habits and the music that I make, because it's very niche, I realized that I need to make a living a lot of something. So went and actually yeah, I mean, I was part of the music scene in Bucharest. I was basically at any gig possible, just trying to make contacts, trying to just build that relationship. Probably not as active as Radu, but definitely, yeah. In regards to location, so yeah, it's as I mentioned earlier, like Romania, musically speaking, a lot of things came very late, and so did technology. So when it came to guitars and stuff, when Radu was talking about that guy who basically told him not to touch his drums, I had similar experiences with people that were basically, they were renting out a studio for people to practice in. However, you're not allowed to touch that. You're not allowed to touch that. Don't play on that amp. And I'm like, what are we actually renting? It was the space. That's what you were renting. And you could only play it. You could only play certain gear, and obviously it was never good gear, you know.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that feeds into why nowadays I am a gearhead. I do like I'm lucky enough to have had the opportunity to play multiple instruments of different qualities and kind of reach what I think is my peak right now. With so I play, as Radu mentioned, we play the Kempers. I've had like the Helix as well. But being a bass player, you don't really need that many effects. So I try to simplify it. The Kemper does the job for me right now as much as possible, and that's why we moved into like a pedal format. Guitar-wise, man, I played for a very long time. I played a 6-string Ibanez BTB. I love that bass. I wish I could at some point buy it back because it was my first high-end like guitar basically. I remember I bought it. I was in Romania moving to the UK in 2 months, and I bought it from a store in Italy. Had it shipped to my friends in it. I bought a case from Germany, sent it to Italy, and my friends sent it to me to Romania. By the time I got to the UK, that bass had traveled Europe more than I did. So yeah, and then after that, I played a couple of Warwicks, played fretless as well. Yeah, that was the Dingwall vibe. I love that. Like, I love the fan fret. They're very comfortable. They're very powerful instruments. And honestly, like, I'm also lucky enough to have a Canadian one, which in quality over the imports, the Chinese Dingwalls is like 5-10 steps above. And you can feel that, and there's nothing flimsy about it. It's built, it's super sturdy. So yeah, what was it? What lessons have I learned as a person? I mean, I think because my experience musically has taught me to just play what I want, and because that makes me happy. But it was always my advice would probably be to just make music for yourself, enjoy yourself. That's one of the things that I love most about when music with Radu. Let's do something what musically, which I really love, to be honest. What else? Favorite artists and albums? I don't know. Like, it's really hard because I go through different phases and different musicians and stuff. Like, what probably Organectomy and Cranium were really big influences on me for this album. Cattle Decap and Job for a Cowboy as well, like the bass, because I listen to obviously the whole thing in general, but I do, being a bass player, I do try and dissect it. And when it came to the bass playing, like the Job for a Cowboy, Nick Shins, man, holy shit, like that guy is amazing. Everywhere that he puts his bass on, it's always got that distinct flavor. It's hard to emulate it, but I've tried to just try and go a little bit above and beyond and add those little quirky, fireworks here and there that he also similar to what he does, because it just makes that bass stand out a little bit and not just be that, especially in slam, you can very easily just do the lower register and keep it there, and people are going to be happy.
Yeah, unison.
But I'm not going to be happy, because if I wanted to play the exact same thing or just play low stuff for 2-3 minutes, I'd just be playing blues. Just do the same walking bass line over and over, and you get bored. I'm not dissing blues. I love blues in general. I just dislike playing it. But yeah, and I don't know, like all-time favorites, probably Steve DiGiorgio, one of my favorite bass players. Geezer Butler, like I play with my like I'm a finger picking player in general, 99% of the time. So Geezer is a massive influence. And yeah, I guess that's it, to be honest.
Okay,
That's
cool. That's a lot. You provided us a lot of information. Thank you both, gentlemen, for providing kind of a 10 to 20 minute synopsis of your story as musicians, telling us about yourself, allowing for 1,361 monthly listeners. The reason I pulled that up is because me personally, when I only have like one monthly listener for my own project, oftentimes I see bands like Pathogenic, Virulence, like Xenobiotic, like Utilize the Remains. I see their monthly count and I'm like, well, that's at least 1,361 people who have heard like a single track from you in the last month. That's really cool. It's really cool to think about. But nonetheless, the show is meant to just provide like a deeper look into the band and see if people appreciate what is a more personal and more personalized, more documentary style podcast session. But as we continue moving forward and we approach the end of the first half, you guys are like, God, this is only the first half. How long am I going to be here? Question 8. What do members of Pathogenic Virulence do for fun to connect outside of musical creation? And this can be a question for either one of you.
I mean, we meet up, not very regularly. We should meet up more. But you know, go to gigs. Usually we meet up at Radu, play a couple of games, have some beer. We should do that more often.
Yeah, it's like what Alin said. I mean, we meet up for gigs, spend time together when we have the chance. We meet up at our places, listen to new music, discussing stuff, around it. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Mostly, yeah.
Basically just nonsense in general.
Obviously, we all have our own extra hobbies that we keep ourselves busy with. But as collectively speaking, yeah, I mean, get together, get drunk, listen to new music, and yeah, go to shows, a lot of shows.
Sounds about right. Makes sense. I think that's like the only question that I forgot to ask, but I think I'll just go ahead and ask the hobbies outside of musical creation question later when we have you guys come back, because that's always fun to learn about too. It's always fun, and also just kind of like it changes your perspective, and especially the viewpoint, right? How people who listen to this band see the members when, per se, I am the guitarist, the vocalist, the main songwriter, but outside of Pathogenic and Virulence, I'm a Twitch streamer. I am a construction mechanic. I'm in the National Guard. Like, people are like, whoa, you're in the National Guard for the UK? What the fuck? Like, stuff like that could be really, really eye-opening for musicians, and then maybe help them feel comfortable in their own skin as far as being a metalhead. But outside of work, maybe they're in the corporate offices of JP Morgan Chase, and they're bank tellers, and the reason they write music is because they have enough Karens on the phone saying, my bank account got hacked. What the fuck is wrong with you people? They're like, yo, I'm about to write a new album right now. But thank you guys for answering that question as far as like the recreational activities that you do to help each other become more of a brotherhood when it's not all serious and all about the riffs and Alin dancing all over the fretboard with his bass guitar, and then maybe Radu's like, bro, can you calm the fuck down with your bass so I can get some spotlight? Like, who knows, right? So in part 2 of this session, this unnumbered session of the Anatomy Crosscast, where one of the biggest things that resides within the name is dissecting the anatomy of a band, person by person, deciding who makes up the vital parts, whether the bones, the skin tissue, the mind, the eyes, the heart, whatever. That is the anatomy of this band. That is the anatomy of Pathogenic Virulence. However, there is also just the mechanic of dotting across the world on an international scale. which has been fun since the beginning, and it will probably, not probably, it will continue being entertaining until I have officially retired from this industry, maybe 2 or 3 decades down the road. We'll see. We'll see if I even last that long. But part 2, now we kind of have Radu and Alin depersonalize. They no longer exist as people. Why would I say that? Well, because we're trying to dissect the anatomy of this band. Now, part 2, Pathogenic Virulence, just as an entity, question 1, we more or less already had Radu discuss that earlier, which the name, how is the name Pathogenic Virulence decided? Well, it is simply a testament and a vague reference to a lot of sci-fi horror and thriller movies and video games that the collective members in the band have become fascinated with and wanted to make groovy, waltz-friendly, brutal death metal based off of, referencing to, compacting all of that pop culture into musical composition, musical writing. So, being that we did answer that question more or less quite some time ago now, question 2 reads as follows. What separates pathogenic virulence from other bands in the brutal death metal community? And when I ask this question, this is a person by person answer, but I want to do a social test and see if this is an answer that's agreed upon, or if person by person there's a slightly adjusted perspective upon what separates this band from others in that community. Take it away, gentlemen.
I mean, personally, I don't think it's necessarily about, separation, how we separate ourselves compared to others. It's more of an integration thing. I mean, we do our own thing the way we feel it, and we're just part of the scene. It's not, we don't necessarily want to be different than others. It's just, this is our own approach. And if people want to think of us as, oh wow, they're different, then okay, that's fine, no problem. But we're not like after that sort of thing.
Right, you don't exactly claim originality with what you write.
I mean, to an extent we do. It's just what separates it probably from other bands is the way we approach the music, I guess.
Right.
But it's not one of those things like we're doing it better than other people, or the scene, like the brutal death metal scene, at least in the UK, is probably like it's big enough, and there's probably a lot more space in there for a lot of other bands to do their own original thing as well, and still be separated from others and not do the exact same thing.
I mean, yeah, we were talking about brutal death metal. I mean, in the 90s or early 2000s, I mean, you could easily, name 10, 20 bands that they would be different from one another. But we're now in 2024, you have millions of bands. You have, Slam Worldwide is posting like 3 bands per day. It's not the kind of thing that, not the kind of genre that like, okay, so these guys are really, really, really different than anybody else. No, I mean, especially that we're not trying to be different, because when you're trying to be different, obviously people will notice that. No, but it's like I said earlier, we're just doing our own thing, our own interpretation of brutal death metal, and like you said, it sounds groovy, so to us it's like that sort of slamming brutal death metal. This is our own
in your face,
our own version of it. And
so the impression I'm getting is, as opposed to trying to separate yourself and be like, we're our own thing, we don't fuck with anybody else, you're more like, well, we understand the history, we understand that it's 2024 and that there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of other bands who have already done the same exact thing. So instead, this is our contribution to the scene. This is our contribution to a culture that has existed long before us, and we happen to be located and have a history that person by person in this specific band is unique to us.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Totally agree with that.
After conducting a lobotomy, or attempting to, for Scourged, and after us concluding the first half of the podcast session, talking about bands that inspired all of the members in Pathogenic Virulence, what do you think distinguishes Scourged from other iconic records relevant to brutal death metal, in your personal opinion? Now, just like the question regarding the, quote, separation from other bands in the community, that's not exactly what this is saying, but what do you think makes this album different from those you have heard and fell in love with over time beforehand?
I mean, I would like to hear that from the listener instead of me saying it, if it makes sense.
Yes.
It's very hard to dissect your own music and to put labels on it. You know, it's very hard to say that, okay, so this is special because you know, it's very, very subjective. So, like, we wrote the music, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we can criticize our own music. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it makes sense.
No, that makes sense.
So it's like you listen to it right now, right, and you form your own idea and opinion about it, and you review it, right?
Yes.
And then someone else might come in and listen to it, and they might have a completely different. Because it's like it depends on your feeling at the moment. Because like I said earlier, I mean there are so many brutal death metal bands out there, and there's so many great, you know, brutal death metal bands out there, and brutal death metal is such a vast musical genre. It's not like you can say brutal death metal and then you can put, you know, Devourment, Defeated Sanity,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
Suffocation, and no, I mean each band, they have their own thing, and it's not like, so yeah, we wouldn't be able to, you know, criticize our own music and make it, you know, give you an argument like why would this be special, because it's, for us, it's different. The way we see it, it's completely different than like how you see it or how other people see it.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay. Well, I do appreciate your transparency and basically stating that when it comes to your own creation, you as creators are actually rather neutral. I'll have you know that that's actually really cool, because as opposed to all of the 81 artist bands or musical personalities prior to this session, well, that's usually something they often think about, but it's almost like you are just grateful to have had the opportunity to create another full-length record, and you're like, if you like it, cool. If you don't, cool. We're going to continue writing music, kind of move on.
Exactly. That's exactly, yeah.
I think it goes down to what I said earlier. You know, obviously I was talking about myself, but I probably could include Radu in this. We're doing this because we like what we're doing, and if other people, you know, relate to it or like it or just draw something from it, just makes us happy. If it doesn't, fair enough. You know, it's fine. Everybody has different taste in music. They can listen to different things. You know, sometimes I don't want to listen to death metal or to black metal or right now I'm in a stoner binge. So it just, you know, but tomorrow I may wake up and I'm going to be like, yeah, I want to listen to Suffocation, you know, or I want to go to like first couple of Cannibal Corpse albums. It's fine. Yeah, and then, you know, that's how it is. Everybody has different ideas of and different moods, and you can't really. I personally would shy away from not like just giving them my personal opinion on the album because it's very like it's very personal, but also I don't want to either give them idea or take away from their personal opinion, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes complete sense. And again, it's definitely a new type of perspective, a new type of neutrality, creative neutrality that you don't really hear about often. So it's very fascinating to hear this. And I think honestly it throws a curveball in the machine of what this podcast is, its original intention, really. So this is a question for Rich. How and why did Scourged become an album instead of an EP? And this could be from a creative standpoint. This could be from a marketing standpoint. What would be your responses person by person?
I mean, creatively, I think because we were already working on ideas after Submerged into non-existence. So we already had Colliginous, or we're working on Colliginous. And we knew that we were going to release either an EP or one song in between Submerged and the next release. But I think once we decided, mostly when Radu decided to just go through and let that musical tap go, he just kind of like let it go, and creatively he just went through it and was like, yeah, we do this. I've got these ideas. Well, let's work on this. Let's do that, and everything just flowed basically. So it wasn't. I'm not saying that we had that much material that we can write like 5 albums out of or whatever. But we knew that there was going to be a full length, and we just needed to let Radu loose.
Fair.
Yeah, I mean, to add to that, I mean, Scourged had a really rough path in the beginning. I mean, we were writing songs when we were finishing to record the first album. So the Anomalous song was written, I think, first in 2020, I believe, or 2021. And then Colliginous Devourer, it was another track that we wrote right before the pandemic. So we actually released the studio version of it, like a practice in the studio, professionally recorded. And we released that right before the pandemic started. So we had this whole thing.
No, I think it wasn't right before. It was mid-pandemic. It was the first kind of restriction.
Mid?
We released that when just after the first batch of restrictions were lifted.
You're right.
And they were thinking that things are going to get better,
and
so they didn't. And we met up, practiced it, and recorded it then. And then we went into like another lockdown, I think, and
and then we went for some lineup changes, because that was the reason why I said that Sports had a rough path, because so we had new songs, ready for a new record while we didn't even release the first one yet. So we had a vocalist that he left, then we got another vocalist, and then he left as well, and then I decided to take the vocals, and it was a mess, ongoing mess for the next couple of years until more stuff. So when you have a lot of lineup changes, and then you have the pandemic as well, and then you have some shows that you want to so you release the first album during the pandemic, and then you're limited into promoting it because you couldn't do any shows because everything was in lockdown. So it was like, okay, so we released the first album, we can't really do any shows for it to promote it, and then we went out of lockdown with a new member. Then that member left, then we had another new member, then that member left, then I've taken the vocals, and then it was all fine. We had a steady lineup, and then we started composing for Scourged, and more songs emerged, and so on. Then our current drummer, Dragos, he had some issues, so he couldn't be the studio drummer. In the meantime, we've released a demo just to put it out to see what everybody thinks, to release it to some labels to see if it catches some eye in different directions. Brutal Mind, contacted us. They were happy to release the demo as an official demo, and we signed up a record deal with them. Then we couldn't get the drummer in the studio because he couldn't do it anymore, so we had to get another drummer. Which we didn't mention it so far. So the drummer from Scorched, his name is Christoph Klingbane. He's the live drummer from Belfegor, drummer for Batyushka. He played live for Vader. He has his own projects. So Scorched had a really rough time to get this form that you just listened it so far. It was just so you had to get to Alan's timeline when he was like, okay, so we're gonna let Radu, just do it, step in, and we were just like, okay, let's just do it.
I mean, I glossed over some of those details.
That's completely fine. No, it's very. Sometimes there are details during the creative process that should probably be left out until further notice. That's completely of you guys' own volition. So no worries.
It wasn't that. It's not just like trying to diss anybody else's contribution to this, and it's just that. I mean, with the pandemic and everything, it just feels like a lot of things. It feels like it took longer than expected for a lot of things, but overall, if you think about it, it didn't really. And because obviously during the pandemic, not a lot happened, you kind of just forget, and things kind of just go like, cross into one another, and it's
but going back to your question, we actually thought about making this album before it became Scorched to make it into an EP, because we had so much time stripped away from us again because of the pandemic, and we had to come back on track to push some live shows and so on to promote the first album. We were like, okay, so we have the first album that we haven't promoted it yet, but we already working on new songs. What are we doing right now? So we have new music, we have new stuff, we have new things that we want to show the world that, okay, so this is us, there's more, and we were like, okay, should we release an EP, a promo, what shall we do? And I don't know, just things evolved the way they did, and at one point we were like, no, we're not going to release any more EPs, we're not going to, we have a few live tracks put out after the first album, we have the demo promo that Brutal Mind decided to put online. We're like, okay, we're just gonna, work with all the tracks that we have, work them properly, and recording them properly, get in the studio, and then that's it. It's 31 minutes of brutal death metal. I mean, that's an LP.
There you go. Okay, cool. Well, the last question before we go ahead and conclude this unnumbered episode of the Anatomy Crosscast just says, briefly discuss the future. Shout out to any bands or people if you feel that that is applicable at this time.
Well, discuss the future. So we're releasing the album on the 31st of July. We have a new video in production that will come out after the release of the album at one point. We're working on some live shows to promote it in the autumn. We might have something a little bit bigger in February in terms of some live shows.
I think shout out probably to the guys from Spawn from Hate, our record, they're basically our label mates. They're just out of Birmingham based as well. We had a show with them at Snuffest, was it?
Snuffest.
At Snuffest, and they also just released an album as well. Really good shit. And I think we're gonna try and we've already talked to them as well. We're hoping to maybe get a few shows together, just to promote both our albums, basically.
Yeah.
I think that's.
I mean, in
there's
terms of
many people, but yeah.
In terms of people that contributed to the album, like I said earlier, George from Tableau Mort, he helped us a lot with the album. I mean, he's basically like another member. He was there from the beginning. He helped us, with the recordings and so on, and some part of the mixing. Dan that I mentioned earlier, who is the art director, very important role in the band. It's not just he's there as well, to support us. I mean, he is in the band, even though he's
an
not
active
playing.
member of the band, but not musically playing, basically. So like basically, if you think about it, like Pathogenic Virulence, it's us and Dan as well. Like when it comes to all of the visual elements, anything that we need or that he can come up with, and we seem to be on the same wavelength 99% of the time, anyways.
Yeah, almost. There are some people as well that from the Manchester area. There's a big scene there of slamming brutal death metal. It's called Slamchester. So fuck yeah. So you get guys like Joe Mortimer from Corpoclasis Crepitation. That he's very, very involved in the scene, and with each occasion he helped us out with a few shows. Jay Gamble from 357 Homicide. He has a festival, Flesh Fest, and quite a lot of bands and people there in the scene in Manchester. Procephalic Mutation as well. Also people from the London scene, quite a few. But yeah, in terms of shout out to people that were that were involved in the album. All the lovely people from Brutal Mind, Denny from Brutal Mind.
Denny,
I mean, we've been in constant contact. I mean, the communication is absolutely amazing with these guys, and they're trying to help us out as much as possible. Of course, Angel Ochoa for being part of the album, which is a fucking massive honor for us. Like you said, Slam royalty, man. So yeah.
And Christoph as well, like for delivering like those drum parts, man.
Christoph, we love Christoph. I mean, I've been watching him drum for many, many, many years. So when we picked him up, we were like, yeah, we want this dude on the album. I mean, if we're gonna, take someone to replace our drummer, he was there on the list.
Without a doubt. Awesome. And I think that this is a new one. This is a brand new one. I've been meaning to do this for quite a long time. If there was a band or artist that you could recommend I reach out to get onto the podcast, whether locally to you or maybe you just know them, they're from another country, that sort of thing, what band would you recommend to get on this show or for me to reach out to get them onto the show?
I would say 357 Homicide from Manchester. They're the next new thing in terms of beatdown slam, man. They know their shit. I mean, yeah, definitely, 100%.
Okay. Alin, do you have a different answer?
Honestly, probably Spawn from Hate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
They just released a new album now at Brutal Mind. I think it's like 1 week old, 2 weeks old.
No, a month old.
It's fucking relentless.
It's literally a month old, but like holy shit, man. It feels fresh and it's fucking great.
Brutal
So-
death metal at its finest.
Yeah.
Sweet. So Spawn from Hate and 357 Homicide, we're coming for you. Or at least I'm coming for you. But thank you, gentlemen, for your time today. This has been another ruthless, brutal death metal episode of the Anatomy Crosscast, in which episode by episode, one day, hopefully, it will be a podcast of world domination. But as far as just keeping account and telling the stories of so many bands from every corner of the planet, world domination, baby, let's aim for it. But it is now for me 2:17 p.m. I basically have an hour and a half to take a nap or something, and then it's time to interview and welcome back to the grave from Australia. Again, as per their recommendations, 357 Homicide and Spawn from Hate, we will be reaching out as soon as possible. Let's see if we can get something set up. Otherwise, everyone, thank you for listening and have a great night.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Thanks so much.